There are many things that made the Constitution, from people to ideas to even older documents that helped them, the founders, that is, to be like, this is what I want the Constitution to have in it. The USA's Constitution is the most important document in the United States history, possibly even the most important in the world. The Constitution, of course, is the law of the USA and has been amended several times throughout our history. It is the oldest permanent constitution in the world and has influenced several other nations to make their own American-like constitution later on. The Constitution was drafted as a replacement to the Articles of Confederation and became the law in 1789. The U.S. Constitution had many influences like people, ideas, and previous documents. The U.S. Constitution is still in force today and has been influenced and has influenced people throughout history. The Magna Carta, made in 1215 AD, was made many centuries before, but was one of the influences on the Constitution, as many of the rights that the Magna Carta gave was later implemented into the Constitution. And it helped yet another idea to go into the constitutional blender. They know that this charter was agreed by King John in 1215 at Runnymede Meadow, and confirmed by Henry III in 1225. It is the most important document in England. This is a well-known document and has had historical value. And because of its Republican ideals, it was an important document that was implemented into the Constitution. Today, the Magna Carta of 1215 is regarded as one of the greatest political documents of Western civilization. It is also a cornerstone of many modern constitutional governments. The Magna Carta helped make the Constitution in its core values, and in a way gave the God-given rights to the Constitution. Of course, it's not the only thing that helped make the Constitution, but it was just another important idea that helped our Constitution. The Connecticut Compromise, or the Great Compromise, helped resolve an issue that helped us set up the creation of the U.S. Constitution. Roger Sherman was a delegate from the New England state of Connecticut. He stepped forward with a compromise. He proposed that the Congress and the Senate consist of 2 members from each state. Thus, in the Senate, all states would be represented regardless of its size. The compromise helped resolve the biggest issues between big states and little states. Both sides wanted something different, but Roger Sherman helped find a middle ground. The little states wanted equal power, but the big states wanted more power. Ultimately, with people coming to this compromise, they managed to complete the foundation for the U.S. Constitution. The Bible helped shape the founders, who in turn shaped the U.S. Constitution. Whether or not you believe in the Bible, it helped shape the Constitution. Most of the colonial Americans at that time, especially the founders, were predominantly Christian. And you can see that in their thinking and their writing of our documents. In God we trust, of course. When the founders wrote the Constitution, they were heavily influenced by the Bible. Anyone who examines their writings, their personal letters, biographies, or public statements, you would realize that the Bible is instrumental in their lives. And found in the founding of America, you will find an abundance of quotations showing the profound extent to which their thinking and lives were influenced by a Christian worldview. Just looking at their writings, you can see they were Christians and heavily influenced by the Bible. The Bible is the most influential ideal in the Constitution, as well as the most influential book in the world. John Hancock was hugely influential in the U.S. Constitution, as his values and ideas helped make the Constitution. In May of 1775, the delegates from all of the 13 colonies gathered at the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia. Boston's leading financier and shipper, John Hancock, was elected president of the Congress. John Hancock was early on important in the founding of America, and with it held huge influences in the state. Hancock became the first representative to sign the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776. John Hancock, when he signed it, it helped start the USA and bring them into making the U.S. Constitution. He did not attend the 1787 Constitutional Convention, however. However, he presided over his home state's convention to ratify the U.S. Constitution and gave a speech in favor of ratification. While he didn't take place in making the Constitution, he helped get his state and helped influence others to ratify the Constitution, and his ideals were still put into the U.S. Constitution. Benjamin Franklin, however, was there at the Constitutional Convention, and he helped influence the Constitution with his many ideals and beliefs. Ben Franklin, at the time of the Constitutional Convention, was 81 years old and was the oldest representative there. Yet he still intended to help and give his thoughts about the future of the country. One of Benjamin Franklin's most famous quotes is, "We must indeed hang together, or most assuredly we shall all hang separately." Goes to show how deeply involved he was. He was for the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. Even with him being 70 to 80 during the whole revolution, he still used his influence to help the USA. He also was the one who helped in the Treaty of Paris. Without it, we might not even have a constitution at all. Benjamin Franklin was important for all that he helped with, from the Declaration of Independence to the U.S. Constitution. He had a hand in it all. He was even there in France to get France to help the USA. James Madison was yet another important member of the Constitutional Convention and helped to get people to adopt the Constitution. Perhaps the most important member of the convention was James Madison of Virginia, whose ideas on law and order and Christian responsibility greatly influenced the Constitution. James Madison brought in his ideals and values to the Constitution. James Madison played a key role in creating the U.S. Constitution and later played a role in getting people to ratify the Constitution. Madison believed that the U.S. needed a strong central government to ratify the Constitution and guide its affairs. Madison's ideas of a strong central government was incorporated into the U.S. Constitution, proving how influential he was. James Madison also played a role in the creation and ratifying of the Constitution. He was probably one of the greatest influences on the Constitution. Alexander Hamilton, while often forgotten in history, was one of the most influential people and a very important founder of our country. Interesting side note, the play Hamilton helped popularize him and get people to know who Hamilton was. Some delegates insisted on a sharp distinction between federal and national. Delegates such as Virginia's Edmund Randolph, New York's Gouverneur Morris, and Alexander Hamilton, and Pennsylvania's John Dickinson openly used the word national to describe the new central government. Alexander Hamilton was important because he believed that we needed to be nationalized and work as one united people. Hamilton's ideals helped make the Constitution, and he played an important role in the adopting of the U.S. Constitution as well. Alexander Hamilton and John Jay were the main authors of the series of 85 articles written between around October 1787 and May 1788, urging ratification of the new Constitution. Together, Hamilton and Madison wrote the Federalist Papers, which helped convince people to ratify the U.S. Constitution. Alexander Hamilton helped influence and ratify the Constitution, and that makes him one of our key founding fathers, as he played many roles in founding, making, and ratifying our Constitution. Roger Sherman helped make the Connecticut Compromise, and without him the Constitution would be very different, if ever even made. Roger Sherman is the only person to have signed all four of the most significant documents in our nation's early history: the Continental Association from the First Continental Congress, the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and the U.S. Constitution. Roger Sherman signed into effect the four most important documents in our history. He helped make a compromise between Virginia and New Jersey in the Connecticut Compromise. Without him, the Constitution might have completely fell apart. Roger Sherman is one of the most important founding fathers of our history, and he's not often talked about versus Alexander Hamilton, George Washington, and many others. John Jay is another important founding father and was another author of the Federalist Papers. Jay favored a stronger union and contributed 5 essays to the Federalist Papers in support of the new Constitution. John Jay helped to convince people to ratify the Constitution and helped serve in the Supreme Court and defend a new Constitution later in life. Jay represented New York at the First and Second Continental Congress and was again elected president of that body. in 1788. Though he did not attend the Constitutional Convention, he did contribute newspaper articles urging other people to ratify the Constitution, and his ideals still went into the Constitution. He may not have intended it, but he played a huge role in convincing people to ratify and telling people, using his influence to convince his state and other states to ratify it. He was more involved in the US Constitution than more people realize. Thomas Jefferson played an instrumental role in the Constitution, and without him, the Constitution would have been different from how we have it today. Thomas Jefferson signed the Declaration of Independence and helped to ratify the Constitution. Absent were two giants from the early days of independence. Thomas Jefferson was also in America's ambassador to France, while John Adams was away as America's ambassador to Britain. Thomas Jefferson wasn't there at the Constitutional Convention, but he laid other groundworks for the Constitution. The Declaration of Independence Committee consisted of 5 men: John Adams from Massachusetts, Ben Franklin from Pennsylvania, Thomas Jefferson of Virginia, and Robert Livingston of New York, and lastly, Connecticut's Roger Sherman. At the insistence of Adams, the task of writing the Declaration was put in Jefferson's hands. Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, and without it, of course, we wouldn't have the country to begin with. While he didn't have a direct hand in the Constitution, he still signed it, he still influenced it, and he still helped people ratify it. George Washington, or the father of our country, was there at the Constitutional Convention and helped preside over the convention as well. He helped to make the USA what it is, starting with the Constitution and ending with the presidency. He was influential through his entire life. He, along with influential people like James Madison and Edmund Randolph, played a key role in getting the Constitution to be ratified. George Washington described the results of the Constitutional Convention and the state's ratification of the document as little short of a miracle. George Washington would later serve the greatest role in leadership as America's president. George Washington could have made himself dictator for life, and the people would have gone with it anyway. But he stepped down after 2 terms. George Washington set the way for presidents to come and helped to create the Constitution, and that is why he's the father of our country. Many ideas came with and hopes for a better future, like the fear of tyranny, influenced the colonists in a huge way. Their fear of a king or a tyrant led them to want democracy, so that if someone got out of hand, they could have been removed from office or had somebody else to be a check and balance. It was huge for them, and it was scary for them to go from a tyrant to, well, we now have powerful people. So in turn, their biggest fear was the biggest influence in creating the Constitution. Hope for freedom was a huge driving factor as well. They wanted to make sure that they could have freedoms like religion, speech, right to bear arms, and so on, which is in our Bill of Rights. The colonists wanted there to be no way for people to take their rights away, hence why we have the Bill of Rights, and the other amendments to the US Constitution. The hope for freedom is one of the bigger ideals that helps shape the Constitution that we know today. This is our USA Constitution. There are so many other influences, but those are our main influences of the US Constitution.